What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Talkin Sports with Jake. We're doing some more sports talk today. Want to give out a big congratulations to the New York Mets, of course, my favorite baseball team. They clinched the playoffs with a win over the Milwaukee Brewers last night. They won 7-2. In Max Scherzer's return to the mound, he was out the last couple of weeks with an injury. He was perfect through 6 innings. They pulled him after 6 innings because they had a 5-0 lead, and Scherzer had not pitched in a couple of weeks. So they pulled him. He only had 68 pitches in 6 innings. He was perfect. No base runners, no anything. I believe he had 9 strikeouts. Honestly, may have thrown a perfect game. They would have let him go, but Buck Showalter decided to yank him as a precaution, which I don't blame him. At this point, the Mets were focused on making sure they win the game because the Atlanta Braves are right on their tail, National League East, and of course, making sure that they secure a playoff spot because it was win and guaranteed at least a wild card spot for the Mets. Congratulations to the Mets, first time since 2016. After 5 straight years out of the playoffs, they are back in the postseason. You will see them in October. Looking at the standing, Yankees still a 5.5 game lead over Toronto in the American League East. Trying to make sure they hang on. Of course, they've struggled since the All-Star break after being the league's best team before the All-Star break. Rays 6.5 back as well. Guardians lead the White Sox by 4 games in the American League Central. Last night clinched the division. A couple days ago, they clinched up a playoff spot, and they officially clinched the American League West. So the Astros win the West for the 6th year in a row. So the East Mets, who, like I just said, they clinched the playoff spot. They are still in first place, of course. They are a game ahead of the Atlanta Braves right now. National League Central, the St. Louis Cardinals have an 8.5 game lead over Milwaukee. And in the West, you have the Dodgers, who have already clinched the National League West and will probably wrap up the best record in the majors sometime before, probably the next week or two. As for the wild card, first wild card in the American League is the Toronto Blue Jays. They are the first wild card. They are a game ahead of the Tampa Bay Rays, who have the second spot. And then you have the Seattle Mariners, who are a half game behind Tampa for the second wild card spot and are a game and a half behind Toronto for the first wild card spot. They're not playing great right now, but they are still in the playoffs as of right now. The Orioles are a few games out, or I believe are like 5 games out or so, 4 or 5 games out. Nationally, of course, the Braves have that first spot locked up. Whoever comes in second place in the National League East will be the first wild card in the National League. After that, got the Padres are the second wild card nationally. They remain a half game ahead of Philadelphia for that last spot. And then you have Milwaukee, who was like 2 or 3 games out. They lost to the Mets last night. They're like 2 or 3 games out of a spot behind Philadelphia right now. And will be standings, regular season winding down, home stretch of the season there for NFL. We had a doubleheader on Monday Night Football last night. First, the Bills throttled the Titans 41-7. Ryan Tannehill was replaced by third-round rookie and their backup Malik Willis late in the third quarter, partly because the game was over. They were down by 5 touchdowns. It's over a quarter to go. Daniel Tannehill getting hurt, but also he did not play well. He had just thrown that pick 6, so figured he's not playing well. The game's over anyway. Don't want to get him hurt. Plus, he's struggling. Let's put the kid in there. He's probably going to be the starter next year anyway. And the Eagles cruised past the Vikings 24-7 in the nightcap. Jalen Hurts had a big game. Kirk Cousins really struggled in that game. He cannot win in primetime. He is so bad when the lights are bright. He is 2-10 on Monday Night Football. I think he has maybe 5 or 6 career wins in primetime. That means Thursday Night Football, Monday Night Football, and Sunday Night Football. And he's been a starter for like 6 or 7 years, and he's got like 5 or 6 career wins in primetime. That's horrendous. Regular game, 1 o'clock, 4 o'clock, fine. He's a top 15 quarterback in the NFL. You give him some good weapons, he'll get the job done. You put him in primetime, when you put him on national television, the guy looks like he shouldn't be in the league. The guy, he was terrible last night. I have never seen anything like it. That's why I don't think the Vikings are going to win the division this year. And I know the Packers lose Devontae Adams. I'll say Aaron Rodgers is getting any younger. And they got still some injuries on the offensive line. because Kirk Cousins can't win in primetime. You just cost them a couple of wins. They might get to the playoffs as a wild card, but they are not going to catch the Packers here. I don't see it. All right, I'm going to go talk about some fantasy football today. Talk about some waiver wire guys for week 3. Throw some running backs. First off, these guys, good chance may have already been picked up because they've been top waiver wire ads for each of the first 2 weeks as well. Ramondre Stevenson appears to be the pass-catching back in New England. He's a guy I think could be a nice guy to pick up. He's produced pretty well the first 2 weeks. Week 1, not so much, but I thought played pretty well last week. The Patriots offense only scored 17 points. They're going only 7 in week 1. Looked a little bit better. Jeff Wilson's a guy you should definitely pick up. He's a new starter for probably the next 4 or 5 weeks or so, at least, with their top back, Elijah Mitchell, injured. When he's gotten playing time the last couple of years, he has played well. He's definitely a guy you should pick up. Jamal Williams, very good number 2 back in Detroit. Swift was nicked up last week, was able to play. Keep an eye on that. He's had some injury problems his first couple of years in the league, and he already almost didn't play last week, so he's a good guy to have on your bench. But some new faces that we have in Arizona. James Conner left the game in week 2 with an injury, did not return. I'm not sure what his status is. They said the injury is not a long-term thing. So it's not super serious, but doesn't mean he could miss possibly 1 or 2 games. So the top 2 backups I have are Darrell Williams and Eno Benjamin. I think both of those guys could be guys you may look to pick up. Both of them are available in pretty much every league. They're both rostered in only 0.3% of leagues. So pretty much any league they should be available. Benjamin played very well in James Conner's absence last week. Darrell Williams was sprinkled in. They both got playing time. They had split reps. Ben maybe was a little bit better as a pass catcher and was used a little bit more in the red zone, whereas Darrell Williams was more of a better overall rusher. So I'm not sure if maybe they'll have Darrell Williams be the 3 down back and have Eno Benjamin be like the goal line guy and the pass catching guy on 3rd down. But I think they could both be guys that you should pick up, especially if you have James Conner and you don't have another solid option, or you weren't able to get Ramondre Stevenson or Jeff Wilson. That's a backup plan. Raheem Mostert is the guy you could pick up. Also, the Dolphins scored 42 points this past week. They had a big offensive explosion. Didn't run the ball too much because remember they were down 35-14 going into the 4th quarter, so they had thrown the ball a lot too. Threw the ball 50 times in that game. It appears Chase Edmonds is the starter. Heading into the year, he was definitely the back to own. Raheem Mostert had 11 carries and 3 catches compared to Edmonds, who had 5 carries and 1 catch. So Mostert had 14 touches in week 2 compared to Edmonds, who only had 6, and he had almost twice as many yards as him. Edmonds only had 41 yards last week. Mostert had 79. So I still do believe Chase Edmonds is the Miami Dolphins back to own. I would still start him over Raheem Mostert. But last week, Mostert was featured more than Chase Edmonds, so he may be a guy to pick up. Even if you have Chase Edmonds, if Raheem Mostert in the coming week takes over as the top back, pick him up now. Now you can just, once Edmonds, kind of fades off, you can insert Raheem Mostert into your lineup, and then at that point, Chase Edmonds, you could either look to trade him, and if not, drop him and pick up another hot waiver wire option. Mark Ingram is a guy I think you should pick up. He's only rostered in 11% of leagues. Alvin Kamara did not play last week, and he had he only had 10 carries on 60 yards. They also they're down by like 10 points in the second half. The offense wasn't getting anything going against Tampa. I think with some better matchups, I think if Ingram starts in week 3, he could have a nice game. Remember, Jameis Winston has 4 broken bones in his back, he has 4 back fractures right now that he's playing through. So my guess is they're going to want to run the ball a little more to take a little bit of the pressure off Jameis Winston. And if Kamara's out, I could see Ingram possibly getting 50 to 20 carry. Obviously, this is his second step with the Saints. He's been, between his 2 stints, it's been there a long time. They still have a pretty good offensive line, and if they're going to be a little more run-heavy, if they don't have Kamara, Ingram's going to get all the carries, and he could have a nice game. Although he only had 60 yards, remember, that's on 10 carries. That's 6 yards a carry. It's maybe the best run defense in the league in Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So now that they play, obviously a much easier defense. I don't know who it's. They get Carolina in week 3, who's a much easier defense to play against than Tampa. Mark Ingram could be in for a nice game if Alvin Kamara is out. And some other guys you might want to keep an eye on, possibly Tyler Allgeier, because Mike Davis is injured. So the starting running back is Cordell Patterson. That said, he is the starting running back. Of course, they're like their back transferred receiver into a running back kind of guy. He is their top back, Tyler Allgeier, who they drafted, I think, in the 6th round. And just because of the lack of depth they have in the running back room, we thought maybe he could be a little bit more involved than other 6th-round rookie running backs usually would be. Week 1 he was a healthy scratch. They decided to have Mike Davis and Cordell Patterson their top 2 backs. But then Mike Davis goes down, so now Tyler Allgeier is by default the number 2 back. And, they don't have the greatest passing attack. They got Marcus Mariota, who has not been a full-time starter in 3 years, as their starting quarterback. They don't have a ton of weapons. They got a talented rookie receiver in Drake London. They got a really good tight end in Kyle Pitts, who only has 4 catches in his first 2 games, and that's it. Like I said, Pitts production, whatever, is way down. So Tyler Allgeier could be a guy that you pick up just to stash on your bench. He's, especially if something happens to Patterson, Allgeier's going to get all the carries, and Falcons going to have to run the ball at least a little bit. Yes, they're going to be down a lot. They're going to have to throw the ball a lot, but, they won't have a great pass guy, so they got to, run the ball at least a little bit. So Allgeier could be a guy you could stash, and another guy maybe what you want to stash on the end of your bench. Jordan Mason's an undrafted free agent because the 49ers, of course, like I said, Jeff Wilson's the starter with Ellie Mitchell out. Their top backup, Tyrone Davis-Price, who's an exciting rookie who the 49ers liked in camp. He just suffered a high ankle sprain. He had 14 carries, actually. So he's going to be out for a little bit. So now Jordan Mason is Jeff Wilson's top backup. 49ers don't usually use one back, but I like to use multiple backs. So, Tyrone Davis-Price, who was a number 2 back last week, had 14 carries. If we lift Jeff Wilson there, and of course Deebo Samuel at times, he's a wide receiver, and he's had times where he gets 12, 14, 15 carries a game. So you never know. Jordan Mason next week could get 18 carries. He gets in the end zone, could have a decent game. Maybe a guy we're stashing. Comes to wide receivers. If you're able to get Curtis Samuel, definitely get him. He's had back-to-back really good game, but he's probably taken by now. Chris Olave is another guy. He had a nice game. Talented rookie receiver. But one guy you definitely should pick up, Garrett Wilson, the rookie receiver for the Jets. He had a big game in week 2. Looked good in week 1 in limited action. They played him a lot more in week 2. Now he had a game under his belt. He got the first career game jitters out. Big game, 8 catches for 102 yards and 2 touchdowns. Huge game. Offensive Rookie of the Year candidate. Maybe the top option in Jets offense right now. Him and Elijah Moore, definitely the top 2 options in Jets offense right now. Should have Zach Wilson coming back, hopefully by week 4 against Pittsburgh. Joe Flacco starting this week against Cincinnati, then he should get back Zach Wilson, although Flacco is much more experienced. Zach Wilson has a higher ceiling and a greater potential. And he does have a much better arm than Joe Flacco on paper. He's got more potential than Flacco. Flacco's deep ball is not what it once was. While Wilson's, of course, though it's still developing, if he can get it right, it's very, very good. Wilson you definitely pick up. Jacoby Myers had a really nice game. I think he's a guy that you should pick up. He could be, in a pinch, be a flex option. The Patriots pass game would struggle in week 1 against Miami. They only scored 17 points. Pittsburgh does have a really good defense, and their passing offense looked a lot better. He had 9 catches, 95 yards on 13 targets, so he got a lot of targets. The Patriots don't really have a true number 1 receiver with Myers and Aguilar and Devontae Parker, so they'll probably receiver by committee there, which doesn't bode great for fantasy, but he's had a big game. Could be a guy you staff on your bench. Another guy you look up picking up if he's available, depending on league, Michael Gallup, who did not play the first 2 games, is coming off an injury. He's expected to return to the Cowboys line on week 3. Dallas needs weapons with Dak Prescott out. Cooper Rush is the starter for the time being. We don't know when. The first or 6 to 8 weeks, which would probably mean week 8 or week 9. Jerry Jones said he might be able to come back in 4 games. Now we're hearing a report he might be able to play this upcoming week, so we don't know. But you look, Noah Brown, was the de facto number 2 receiver for Dallas, had 91 yards and a score. So it appears that Cooper Rush is looking to spread the ball. So at least as long as Cooper Rush is the quarterback for Dallas Cowboys, which will most likely probably be at least another 3 or 4 weeks, if not another 5 to 6, 7 weeks. Goff could be a guy that could still get touches, although he may not have a full workload in week 3. I would think by hopefully at least week 5 he would be full go. So he should be a guy for now, stash on your bench, and could be a decent flex option down in a couple of weeks. Jahan Dotson's another guy. He had a nice game. It was quiet in his first career game. First round pick this year by the Commanders. Very nice game, though. Week 2. If Washington's going to be throwing the ball a lot, especially with Brian Robinson, who they want to be their starting back this year, still working his way back, because after the gunshot incident, they may be more passing offense than a running offense. And Dalton had a nice game. Could be a guy that you could stash. Some other guys you might want to stash something into your bench. Noah Brown just talked about. He's looked good his first 2 weeks. He had 20 points week 2, had double digits in week 1. He's looked very good. He stepped up for the Dallas with Michael Gallup injured to be the de facto number 2 receiver. He's looked good. Shepard didn't have a great game week 2, but he also did get a lot of targets. The Giants are going receiver by committee. But Kenny Golladay, which the disastrous free agent signing of Kenny Golladay, played just like 3 snaps last week. So right now, outside of Kenny Golladay, it's Shepard, it's Darius Slayton, and Kadarius Toney, who's got a lot of question marks. There's no, the Daniel Bellinger is a rookie tight end. He got a touchdown, but he's still developing. So you could argue Sterling Shepard might be the receiver to own for the Giants, just because Toney's got so many questions. There was rumors that they were trying to trade him after only 1 year. Of course, we got a new regime. This regime did not draft him last year. The draft pick was a little bit criticized as well when it happened. He had a lot of injuries last year as well. Kenny Golladay looks like a disaster. Darius Slayton is good, but he's not like the world on fire. So if Shepard, is going to get a lot of targets, could be a guy to stash on your bench. Another guy, Greg Dortch, is a guy. For the Arizona Cardinals, of course, DeAndre Hopkins suspended until week 7. Rondell Moore, talented second-year receiver. He is injured. Not sure when he's coming back. He had Greg Dortch, 13-plus points in each of his first 2 games. He's probably their number 2 receiver right now, with D-Hop and Rondell Moore out behind Marquise Brown, so he should be a guy that you should pick up. And if he's available, Nelson Aguilar's a guy. I don't think he's that good of a player, but he had a big game last week. He had 6 catches for 110 yards and a touchdown. He was featured in a lot of different formations. Could emerge possibly the top receiver for New England. That's a guy you should stash. I think both of the Patriots receivers, Nelson Aguilar and Jacoby Meyer, are definitely worth picking up. Comes to tight ends. If you can get Gerald Everett, you're probably not going to be able to get him, but he's looked good so far. Mike Gesicki had a nice game as well. If you're able to get him, pick him up. But if those 2 guys aren't available, Hayden Hurst could be an option. So he did have 7 points last week. If you're in need of a tight end, if if George Kittle is still battling injuries, and you don't know what to do, there's worse options than Hayden Hurst. 7 points isn't that good, but not horrendous for a tight end. Of course, he's probably the 4th or the 5th option in that offense. So I would say Hayden Hurst is at least worth a pickup if you have a question mark at tight end. Evan Ingram, yes, he's not very good. His hands are like rocks. But the Jaguars receiver room isn't blowing anybody off the page. Christian Kirk had a big game, but they only have a true number 1. I think he's a guy to at least stash in your bench if something happens to your tight end. There's, again, like Hayden Hurst, there's worse fill-in options. Another guy I look at is Logan Thomas. 2 years ago, he averaged 11 fantasy points a game, which is good for the 3rd most in fantasy football among tight ends. Of course, last year was injured, but he's got 11 targets over his first 2 games. He scored a 20-yard score. Although the 110 targets he saw in 2020, of course, Washington did not have a lot of weapons that year. He probably won't come that close to that. But if he can get to 80% of that, which I think he can get to, he can still be one of the better fantasy football tight ends. I think he's a guy worth picking up. One more guy you may want to stash on your bench, maybe as a buy component. Tyler Conklin, who is the Jets starting tight end now. I mean, they got two guys. They got him. They got CJ Uzomah. Uzomah did not play last week, so Tyler Conklin became the de facto starter. He had 16 targets in his first 2 seasons, and he was the number 2 tight end in week 1. And he still has 16 targets. He did have a drop or 2 last week, but overall, did have a nice game. Joe Flacco's been looking for him. Possibly for week 3, if George Kittle is out, could be an under-the-radar option. Now let's look at the quarterbacks. If Tua is available, definitely pick him up. Week 1, he looked decent. Went off this past week, 460-plus yards and 6 touchdowns, had over 40 points. If he's available, you got to at least have him as a bye week replacement. And probably is worth starting at this point. But the good chance he may be taken. If not, Carson Wentz may still be available. Okay, I'm not a fan of Carson Wentz. I don't think he's that good. That being said, he is the first quarterback in the Super Bowl era to have 300 passing yards and 3 pass touchdowns in each of his first 2 games with a new team. He has been a good fantasy option. He's a very good bye replacement. I would stash him now before somebody else does. Jared Goff. It's funny. The top 2 picks in 2016, Goff and Wentz, were both disappointments, or both got them saying they should trust all of a sudden. Goff had 256 yards and 4 scores. He's a guy, if he has a matchup, could be a decent play. So I would be a guy, again, I would pick him up before somebody else does. Some other guys you might want to look at this point. These are guys like if you had Dak Prescott, he got hurt, or let's say you're worried about Joe Burrow's rough start, or you got a solid quarterback, but they have a bad matchup. With Jimmy Garoppolo not going to be starting the entire year, he could be a good bye week replacement guy you might want to stash now. Mariota isn't the best, but he did play pretty well, especially in the second half against a very good Rams defense. On paper, supposed to be a good Rams defense. Could be a guy you could pick up in a pinch for a body replacement. Also, Cooper Rush has looked pretty good. He did look pretty good against Cincinnati last week. So, could be another streaming option. And for those of you that stream defenses, I think Dallas' defense is someone that is maybe a good option this week. Their pass rush has looked really good. 8 sacks for the first 2 games, only allowing 18 points a game. The Giants' offense, it does not scare anybody, or even their defense that has been the reason that they're 2-0. So they could be a good option. That could be a low-scoring game. With Dallas' offense struggling, dying a lot of injuries, and the Giants not having a great offense either. So Dallas defense this week is probably a good stream. Also the Saints defense, which of course is a very good option. They get Carolina, who offense is led by Baker Mayfield, who's not that good. Fairmont has not looked pretty this year. It's got a great defense that they could put up a nice number this week. And also, you could have a same defense for a couple of weeks. Week 5, they get Cincinnati, whose offense is struggling for whatever reason. And then week 5, they get Seattle, whose offense is not good. And week 6, they get Cincinnati, whose offense is struggling right now. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you all for listening and tuning in. Until next time, so long, and have a great day.